But first to Iraq and what the government there is calling a threat to all nations. The group, formerly known as the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, has declared a caliphate. It now wants to be known as the Islamic State, with an aim of uniting the territory under its control from parts of northern Syria through to areas in eastern Iraq. It said it's been given the authority by its own religious council. And this is how its supporters in Syria welcome the news. In the town of Raqqa, smaller groups have said they'll join the Islamic State, but there's been no word from its major rival, Al-Qaeda. Meanwhile, the Iraqi army is still fighting for control of Tikrit. It fell to Islamic State fighters after a sweeping advance almost 3 weeks ago. And the government is claiming it's retaken a strategic crossing on the Jordanian border. But let's go now to Baghdad and to Imran Khan, who is in the city for us. Imran, tell us more about the reaction to this declaration of an Islamic State.
Well, there's been no official reaction from the government. Qasim Atta, the military spokesman, did say that the group poses a threat globally, and he said that it was a very strong threat that they posed globally. But I've been speaking to people, both Shia, Sunni, and a military source, who have really dismissed the idea that they can create this Islamic State. They've said that these groups are delusional, that they don't have the religious legitimacy to be able to do so, that they don't even have the popular support within Iraq to mount such a move. Still, that hasn't stopped Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi from declaring himself the new caliph. Let's take a look now at what he wants and what the political implications for that are. In an audio message and a manifesto published on the web, a line in the sand has been drawn. The Islamic State is the new name for ISIL, says the group. It's a declaration of intent, the establishment of the Islamic Caliphate. The group say the territories that they control are now united under the leadership of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the new caliph. It intends to unite areas from Aleppo, Syria to Diyala, Iraq under its black flag. The last time a caliphate existed in the world, it was 1924, and the Ottoman Empire was in its final days. The Sunni rebels in charge of Tikrit and other cities have been asked to pledge allegiance. So far they've not reacted to the statement, but fighting still continues for the town. This announcement will put pressure on Iraq and Syria. It's designed to get people to rally around the group's cause, but it will also have a political impact here in Iraq. On July 1st, the parliament come together to discuss the formation of a new government. This announcement, plus other pressures, will be a big test for Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki to see if he has the support to remain in the job. But as the crisis goes on, even the Prime Minister's natural allies, such as the Shia political party, the Sadrists, aren't confident the Prime Minister has the support.
I believe that the chances for the current Prime Minister to run for a third term are very low in comparison to other candidates. We believe that according to the Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani, it is better to choose the one who can get the consensus and the acceptance of all the political partners and blocs across the political and sectarian divide.
Sunni politicians have long called for the Prime Minister to go and now openly say that his exclusionary style is to blame.
Firstly, his policies have ended his political life expectancy. His great failure in not being up to the task is not managing state institutions under his command in a professional way. To be biased and unjust amongst the different segments of the Iraqi society, it's these factors that have helped him lose his support.
Politically, Maliki did win the popular vote in Iraq. His party got the most seats, but not enough to form a government, so he needs alliances. Alliances he needs to find with other political blocs in order to remain Prime Minister. With the Islamic State now upping the stakes with their declaration, the pressure from all sides is mounting.
Indeed, lots of pressure increasing, as you say, Imran. What has been the military response, or what is the likely military response to this declaration?
Well, let's take a city like Tikrit, Stephen. Tikrit has been taken over by Sunni rebels since about the 11th of January. The group that's fighting there is the Naqshbandi army. They aren't part of the Islamic State or the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. They're a separate rebel group. They're fighting simply for regime change here in Baghdad. Their war is against Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. It's not to form a caliphate. However, they joined the Islamic State as a flag of convenience because the Islamic State were fighting and they were making gains and they were well funded and well armed. That's why they joined that group. Now the Islamic State have made this declaration of a caliphate. This will have an impact on the fighting on the ground. It will mean that a group like the Naqshbandi army have to make a decision now whether to pledge allegiance and use the backing of that group to continue their fight or whether to try and go it alone. So let's see what happens in the coming days. The reaction from the Sunni rebels now is key.
Imran Khan in Baghdad. Thanks, Imran. The Free Syrian Army says it's committed to fighting the Islamic State. It wants more cooperation with the United States to fight what it calls terrorism. The FSA issued a statement shortly before the Islamic State announcement, which said ISIS continues to besiege Syrian revolutionary forces on the border between Iraq and Syria. And the key to defeating the al-Qaeda offshoot, ISIS, is to strengthen the tribes and free Syrian army fighters. Well, the FSA says it's backing those words by sending its fighters to Deir az-Zor in Islamic State heartlands. These pictures are said to show fighters heading to the al-Bukamal crossing with Iraq. It's controlled by al-Qaeda's Jabhat al-Nusra fighters, al-Nusra Front, who are cooperating with their Islamic State rivals in the area. Let's get more on all of this from the journalist Bilal Abdul Karim in Doha. He's filmed armed groups fighting in Syria. What was their impact in Syria?
Well, the impact initially when they were together with Jabhat al-Nusra, they were a very powerful fighting force. But then there was a split between the two. One group went one way, another group went another way. And the ISIS group went a bit on the strong side. And
when you say a bit on the strong side, what does that mean?
Well, it means that there are a lot of problems with the Syrian people. They were not appreciative of their presence there. They felt that they were being treated as if they were second-class citizens in their own country.
So they were being elitist?
Some people would definitely call it being elitist. Yes, they would call it that.
Okay. What is the difference, do you think, between ISIS and other militant groups?
They're all after a similar goal in the respect that they all want to have an Islamic State. But their means of getting that is a bit different. For example, if you have the other Islamic groups, which are primarily Syrian, for example, the Islamic Front, they have a better understanding of how to deal with the Syrian people. However, ISIS is 95% foreign, and therefore they have a more difficult time in terms of getting the people to understand them and them understanding the people.
You met them personally?
Yes, I have.
And what's your view of them as human beings, as fighters, as religious zealots? How did you find them?
Well, there are two different kinds amongst others. You have the ordinary fighter. Some of them are actually very nice people, very sincere. But then you have others who are on an upper level in terms of they are commanders or leaders, which may have a different agenda. And, you know, so
what do you mean
it's
they
not
may
the same.
have a different agenda?
Well,
you mean more violent, more extreme? What do you mean?
For example, if you look at the U.S. military, sometimes the government has an agenda, and sometimes the soldiers may think that they're fighting for a particular ideology or cause, which the government doesn't necessarily share with them, so they're not always one and the same. So likewise with the ISIS group, I do believe that there is a bit of a disconnect to some extent between their fighters and their leadership.
Just very briefly, they've declared this caliphate. Do they have the resources to run a caliphate that size?
I don't think that the issue is whether they have the resources or not. I think that they've got to sell that idea to the people which are surrounding them, and they haven't done that yet.
And we don't know about the resources. Bilal Abdul Karim, thank you. Iraq's Kurds fear Sunni rebels plan to push into their autonomous region in the north In recent days, Kurdish forces have been shoring up their defences. They say they're facing a serious threat from the Mosul border. Zaina Hodder reports.
There is no mistaking who is in charge here. The self-declared Islamic State, which has been fighting as part of a wider rebellion in Iraq for weeks, guards the gates of Mosul. They're snipers positioned at the entrance of Iraq's northern city. This is a front line. Just 500 meters away are the Kurdish Peshmerga forces. They have been fortifying their defenses days after a suicide bombing targeted their forces at this crossing.
On
June 26, the Islamic State sent a suicide bomber in a truck, and he blew himself up close to the checkpoint. That is why we're beefing up security.
The autonomous Kurdish region in the north hasn't been affected by the fighting between the Iraqi government and the Sunni groups. But authorities here say they are facing a threat. They tightened controls and imposed new restrictions at all crossing points.
At the start of the crisis, hundreds of thousands of people fled Mosul to Erbil. They were able to use cars, but things have changed. They can only enter by foot, and only a handful of people are arriving. That is because the Kurdish security forces have new security measures in place.
And while those measures might make life more difficult for many Iraqis who are searching for security, Kurdish officials insist they are needed to preserve stability in their region.
The
Islamic State is planning to control the whole of Iraq, and they will impose their own rules on the people of Iraq. They don't respect human rights, so we are ready to spill our blood along the front line to protect our children and women.
The Peshmerga share a 1,000-kilometer-long border with the Sunni militia group, and both groups have engaged in clashes in some areas over the past few weeks. The Kurds have so far been able to hold their lines, but the presence of American military advisors in this region underscores how seriously they regard the threat. Zaina Hodder, Al Jazeera, Northern Iraq.